Hey,
Chris,
Felix.
Felix here
Hey,
again,
Coach.
and kind of talking about the Stanley Cup segue here. The league, the NHL can be kind of perceived as a copycat league at times. If we think back to LA winning their 2 cups in 2012 and 2014, the teams kind of wanted to establish this heavier style of play. Whereas when Pittsburgh won their 2 in a row, teams then shifted towards smaller, more utility type players. And now with this Stanley Cup final we just saw this year, we kind of see this heavy team back style again. So I was wondering, how does this go into your evaluation of players? And then do you look at the trends for where the league's at and how you match that to a player when you're scouting?
It's a good. I think, Felix, what we try and do, and you guys probably talk about this a lot, is it's difficult to watch the regular season in the NHL, and I'll be careful here, and then watch the playoffs because it's a different game. There's hardly any penalties called. It is harder. It's 2 months every second night. It's a grind. And I agree that it's a copycat league, and we talk about what type of players and big defensemen and heavy forwards. We do talk about that, but I think what we catch ourselves and we don't want to get caught up in is, I agree it's very much so a copycat league. So wouldn't the real question be to get ahead of the curve and know where the league's going to be in 3 years? And that's probably a better question. If it's going to continue to go speed and skill and one-on-one and 2-on-2s out of the corner, if that's all the place the game is going, then we probably should prepare for that by having that type of player that's going to be there 3 years from now and not be catching up. So that's what we spend a lot of time talking about. And at the end of the day, it's upper management has all the information and they have to use that accordingly and try and build a team. And as scouts, we're not really building the team very much at all. We're trying to take the best players based on this guy versus that guy. And if the league keeps going in the right direction, hopefully it pays off and you've got the right players and you're not playing catch up. But I think a lot of teams get caught playing catch up. And I hope I answered your question.
Oh yeah, for sure. That was definitely a nice answer. And I agree with you for sure. Definitely you want to be ahead of the curve in that way.
That's a really interesting point, though, Chris, in the sense that you were saying that you kind of need to distinguish the regular season from the playoffs, right? We have like this kind of recency bias that just because this worked in the playoffs, now that kind of throws, I guess, the NHL themes on its axis a little bit. But maybe it's
And that can be frustrating for sure. I think it's frustrating for the players. It's frustrating for the coaches. But I think when you look at the balance of your team, depth becomes a pretty huge issue in regard to being able to have guys come up and play if they need to play, and those guys that are watching every night in the press box that can actually come in with an injury and make a contribution. And the playoffs does, play itself out as a bit of a marathon in itself, but you get caught in that, you got to get in. And the good news is, I think, and I'm not trying to, there's a lot of really good guys I know that scout for St. Louis, and I'm very happy for some of those guys. And I think it's pretty cool they were in last place January 1st, and it blew that whole theory.
Incredible,
unbelievable theory out of the water about the American Thanksgiving. And I remember reading articles in Vancouver, if you're not in over the line by January or American Thanksgiving, you're never making it. Like that's pretty inspirational for teams that are maybe struggling on January and maybe need to make a change. So that's pretty cool too.
Would only happen in hockey.
Yeah, it's unbelievable when you think about it. To come from last place and win a Stanley Cup in January, it's pretty amazing. So there's hope.
That's why we love this sport.
Keeps you tuned in.